The bullies had no idea that Jamal was a martial arts champion. What would you do if those who tormented you suddenly realized you were much stronger than they ever imagined? Jamal Carter was always quiet, humble, and kept his head down. To the bullies at Westwood High School, he was the perfect target. Just a skinny black boy who never fought back, an easy subject for their cruel jokes. Every day they laughed at him, shoved him to the ground, and humiliated him, believing he couldn't do anything to fight back. But they didn't know Jamal had a secret that would make them silent and trembling in fear. Each morning, as he walked through the school gates, he felt the weight of anxiety settle in his chest. He was always on edge, bracing himself for the next insult, the next shove. Bradley's mocking voice rang out, "Hey, Jamal, what are you up to? Hiding in the library like a nerd?" The crowd erupted in laughter, but Jamal learned that responding only offered them more reasons to torment him. Jamal recalled a day in the library when Bradley and his friends approached him, smirking as one of them grabbed his book and scribbled a racial slur across the cover. "Let me decorate this for you," Bradley taunted, each word dripping with malice. Jamal clenched his fists, his heart racing, yet he remained silent, knowing that resistance would only provoke them further. At lunch, he endured more humiliation when one of Bradley's lackeys snatched his tray and dumped it on the floor, causing food to scatter everywhere as the cafeteria erupted in laughter. The worst part wasn't the bullying itself. It was the silence of those around him. Students turned a blind eye, either afraid of Bradley or indifferent to Jamal's plight. Even teachers, who were supposed to protect him, ignored his suffering or dismissed it as harmless teasing. Jamal knew that if he reported the bullying, no one would believe him. Instead, he taught himself to endure, believing that one day things would change. As he rode his bike home, the sunset casting long shadows, Jamal felt a heavy weight in his chest. Home didn't feel safe. It was simply a refuge from the torment of school. He cycled past bustling streets and crowded cafes, finally turning into a narrow alley where an old wooden sign swayed gently in the evening breeze, reading Kobayashi Martial Arts Academy. This dojo was more than just a place to train. It was where he could truly be himself. He entered the dojo, inhaling the familiar sense of sweat and aged wood, a sense of calm washing over him. Other students practiced, each movement focused and precise. In the center of the room stood Sensei Kobayashi, a seasoned instructor with sharp eyes who nodded at Jamal's arrival. Jamal bowed in respect and moved to the corner to warm up. But before he could begin, Sensei Kobayashi approached him. "Is something wrong today?" he asked, his voice steady and perceptive. Jamal hesitated, shaking his head, but his sensei wasn't easily deceived. "Jamal, you can hide your feelings from the world, but you cannot hide them from yourself." Jamal clenched his fists, feeling a surge of emotions he struggled to articulate. He didn't want to admit that each day at school felt like a psychological battle he always lost. "People can take your honor, but no one can take the strength inside of you," Sensei Kobayashi continued. Those words resonated deeply with Jamal, igniting a determination within him he hadn't felt in a long time. The strings he had suppressed for years began to resurface. He had trained in martial arts since childhood, a legacy from his father, who had taught him that martial arts was not just about fighting, but about self-control. As he stepped onto the training floor, performing his moves, a quick kick, a solid punch, Jamal felt a sense of rediscovery, a powerful part of himself awakening. He knew that he couldn't let the bullying continue indefinitely. The time would come when he would have to confront Bradley, and when that moment arrived, he would be ready. The bullying escalated day by day, each encounter leaving Jamal feeling increasingly isolated. Bradley's taunts grew sharper, more vicious, and the atmosphere at Westwood High became unbearable. Jamal often found himself lost in thought, wishing he could escape the relentless cycle of humiliation. His heart raced each time he approached the school gates, bracing for the inevitable insults and cruel jokes that awaited him. One afternoon in the cafeteria, as Jamal stood in line to buy his lunch, a wave of dread washed over him. He noticed Bradley and his friends lurking nearby, their eyes glinting with malicious intent. Just as he reached for his tray, one of Bradley's lackeys snatched it away and sent it crashing to the floor, food splattering everywhere. The room erupted in laughter, and Jamal felt the heat of embarrassment flood his cheeks. He bent down to pick up the mess, ignoring the mocking voices that surrounded him. But inside, his anger simmered, and he struggled to keep it contained. Jamal remembered the library incident vividly. He had been sitting quietly, trying to immerse himself in a book, when Bradley and his gang approached with their usual smirks. One of them yanked the book from his hands and defaced the cover with a racial slur. "You don't really belong here, do you?" Bradley jeered, and his friends laughed, reveling in Jamal's humiliation. Once again, Jamal clenched his fists, fighting back the urge to retaliate. He had learned that any sign of weakness would only invite further torment. As the days passed, Jamal began to notice subtle changes in his surroundings. The other students, who had previously laughed and cheered Bradley on, seemed to grow more hesitant. Perhaps they were beginning to realize how cruel the bullying truly was. But for Jamal, the silence from his peers was deafening. Some students offered him sympathetic glances, while others looked away, unwilling to intervene. Even the teachers, who were supposed to safeguard him, often turned a blind eye, dismissing the bullying as mere teasing. Jamal knew that if he reported his tormentors, it would only backfire. He would be labeled overly sensitive, unable to take a joke, or worse, a troublemaker. So he maintained his silence, convincing himself that it would all pass eventually. Yet deep down, he understood that there would come a day when he couldn't remain silent any longer. Riding his bike home was a bittersweet escape. The sunset stretched across the sky, casting long shadows on the pavement as he pedaled through familiar streets. Home was a refuge, but it was not a place where he felt truly safe. It was merely a break from the constant torment he faced at school. As he turned onto the narrow alley leading to the Kobayashi Martial Arts Academy, Jamal felt a flicker of hope. This dojo was where he could shed the weight of his worries and embrace his true self. Inside the dojo, he was enveloped by the familiar sense of sweat and aged wood. The ambience was peaceful, a stark contrast to the chaos of his everyday life. As he joined the other students in practice, he felt a sense of belonging wash over him. Sensei Kobayashi, his mentor, observed the class with a watchful eye, ensuring that each student performed the techniques with precision and focus. When Jamal stepped onto the training floor, he could feel the tension and his muscles began to dissipate. He had trained hard in martial arts, not just to defend himself, but to cultivate self-discipline. Each session was an opportunity to connect with the strength within him, to push through the struggles he faced outside the dojo. Today, however, he felt different. The anger and frustration he had bottled up were beginning to bubble to the surface. As he practiced his movements, a swift kick, a powerful punch, Jamal found himself reflecting on his situation at school. The strength he had learned in martial arts was not just physical, it was about control and resilience. He had always believed that martial arts was a means of self-defense, not a tool for retaliation. But now, for the first time, he wondered if it was time to take a stand. After a grueling training session, Jamal left the dojo, his heart pounding with a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. He pulled his hoodie over his head, a habit he had developed to shield himself from the world. But as he wheeled his bike out of the alley, he heard a familiar voice filled with contempt. How ridiculous, a black kid learning martial arts. Who gave you the idea you could be stronger than us? Jamal froze, his heart racing as he recognized Bradley standing just a few steps away, a mocking smile plastered on his face. Behind him were his loyal followers, Ryan and Kyle, their eyes gleaming with anticipation. Jamal tightened his grip on his backpack, taking a deep breath to steady himself. He knew he couldn't show any weakness. If he did, Bradley would seize the opportunity to unleash even more torment. "Hey, I'm talking to you, rat." Bradley stepped forward, blocking Jamal's path. "You really think learning martial arts will change anything? You think you'll beat me?" His voice dripped with sarcasm, and Jamal felt a surge of anger rise within him. But he forced himself to remain calm, refusing to let Bradley control his emotions. As he attempted to walk away, Bradley suddenly slapped him hard on the back, causing Jamal to stop. "Watch out, Jamal. You know, sometimes accidents happen. Someone might accidentally ruin your dojo. Who knows?" he whispered, his tone smooth but laced with a hidden threat. Jamal's mind raced with memories of the dojo, the one place where he felt safe. He knew that Bradley and his friends were not just making idle threats. They were capable of causing real harm. That night, as Jamal lay in bed, he recalled his father's words from years ago, reminding him that the true essence of martial arts was about maintaining one's fighting spirit. But now, as he faced the reality of his situation, Jamal felt that spirit being tested. He clenched his fist, determined not to let Bradley and his gang take away his strength. The time for silence was drawing to a close, and when the moment arrived, he would be ready to fight back. As the days passed, the bullying intensified, and Jamal found himself at a breaking point. Each encounter with Bradley felt like a weight pressing down on him, suffocating and relentless. He could no longer ignore the mounting anger inside him, nor the fear that gripped him every time he set foot on school grounds. The turning point came one late afternoon when he arrived at the dojo, expecting the familiar comfort of training. Instead, he was confronted with a chilling sight. The outside wall of the dojo was defaced with racist slurs and crude drawings. Jamal's heart sank. This was not just an attack on the building. It was a direct assault on everything he held dear. Sensei Kobayashi was already there, kneeling down and methodically cleaning the wall. When he noticed Jamal, he simply looked up, his gaze calm and unwavering. "We'll clean this up, Jamal. The worst things never stay for long," he assured, but Jamal couldn't share his sense of tranquility. Rage bubbled within him, and for the first time, he felt like he was on the verge of losing control. The following week at school, Bradley and his crew ramped up their harassment. Jamal endured more than just verbal taunts. They began to leave offensive notes in his locker and mock him openly in class. One day, during gym, Ryan feigned an accidental shove that sent Jamal sprawling to the floor. "Whoa, look at our little fighter." "Guess you haven't learned that move yet, huh?" He laughed, and the room erupted in derisive laughter. Inside, Jamal was a storm of fury and humiliation. He gritted his teeth, refusing to react, but the anger was building, threatening to spill over. He thought back to the teachings of his father, who had instilled in him the value of patience and self-control. Yet as the days turned into weeks, Jamal felt that patience wearing thin. He longed to fight back, to show Bradley that he was not the weakling they believed him to be. One evening, as he left the library after studying, Jamal unknowingly walked into a trap. Bradley and his gang were waiting for him in the parking lot, their expressions predatory. "Thought you could just walk away, huh?" Bradley sneered, stepping forward with an air of false bravado. "Didn't you learn anything at your little dojo?" His gang laughed, and Jamal felt the familiar knot of anxiety tighten in his stomach. Before he could react, Ryan lunged at him, yanking his shirt and splattering it with a can of paint, leaving a red racist symbol across his back. The laughter echoed in his ears as Jamal stood frozen, his mind racing with a mixture of disbelief and anger. The humiliation was overwhelming, but as he looked down, something within him shifted. He couldn't take this anymore. In that moment, a fire ignited inside him. Memories of his father's teachings flooded back, reminding him of the strength he had cultivated in the dojo. The fighting spirit his father had encouraged was awakening, and for the first time, Jamal felt ready to confront his fears. He clenched his fists, his breath steadying, and took a fighting stance, surprising even himself. The atmosphere around them shifted. Bradley and his friends paused, confused by Jamal's sudden change. No longer was he the timid boy they had tormented for so long. The tension in the air was palpable, and as Bradley charged at him, Jamal instinctively sidestepped, using Bradley's momentum against him. The move was fluid, a technique he had practiced countless times, and it sent Bradley stumbling to the ground. The parking lot fell silent, shock etched across the faces of all three bullies. Jamal stood firm, his posture strong and resolute. He had not thrown a single punch. He had only defended himself with the skills he had honed in the dojo. Bradley, now on the ground, stared up at Jamal, disbelief and anger swirling in his eyes. "I don't want to fight," Jamal said, his voice steady, "but I'm not afraid of you anymore." With those words, he turned and walked away, leaving a defeated Bradley behind, grappling with the reality of his own vulnerability. The next morning, as Jamal entered school, he could feel the change in the air. Whispers followed him down the hallway. He sensed a new energy among his peers. The news of what had happened in the parking lot had spread like wildfire, and the narrative was shifting. Students who had once overlooked him now looked at him with a mix of respect and curiosity. However, Jamal also felt the weight of doubt as he overheard snippets of conversations. Bradley was already spinning the story into one of victimhood, claiming Jamal had ambushed him and his friends. Jamal felt a knot of anxiety tighten in his chest. Would anyone believe him? Would they see him as the aggressor instead of the victim he truly was? Despite the uncertainty, Jamal knew he had crossed a threshold. He had stood up for himself, and though the path ahead might be fraught with challenges, he felt a newfound strength within him. The fight wasn't just against Bradley. It was also a fight for his own identity, a battle against the fear that had held him captive for so long. He was ready for whatever came next, determined to reclaim his power and inspire others along the way. The days that followed Jamal's confrontation with Bradley marked a significant shift in the atmosphere at Westwood High School. As he walked through the halls, he felt the weight of curious eyes upon him. Whispers filled the air, buzzing with a mixture of admiration and disbelief. Jamal had become the unexpected hero, the boy who had stood up to the school's bully. Yet, amid the newfound attention, he also sensed a lingering tension. While some students approached him with respect, others remained skeptical, unsure of how to reconcile the Jamal they had known. The quiet, submissive boy with the one who had fought back. Even Trey, one of the few black students Jamal had occasionally chatted with, cast a fleeting glance his way before turning away, seemingly unwilling to get involved. Jamal felt a pang of disappointment. He had hoped for support from those who shared his experiences, but fear still held many in its grip. In the cafeteria, Jamal sat at an empty table, unpacking his lunch while glancing at the other students. He noticed Bradley at the far end, surrounded by his dwindling group of friends. Once the center of attention, Bradley now seemed to be struggling to hold on to his status. The laughter and admiration that had once accompanied him were replaced with whispers and side glances. Jamal felt a mixture of triumph and concern. He knew that Bradley wouldn't take his defeat lightly. At the end of the school day, Jamal received a message from the principal's office. "Jamal Carter, please report to the principal's office immediately." A wave of anxiety washed over him. He did not need to guess what awaited him. Bradley had likely spun a web of lies, attempting to manipulate the narrative in his favor. As Jamal approached the office, the tension in his stomach tightened. He stood outside the door, gripping the straps of his backpack, preparing for the inevitable confrontation. Inside, the atmosphere was heavy, like a courtroom where the verdict had already been decided. Principal Parker, with his graying hair and stern expression, sat behind the desk alongside Mrs. Bennett, the school counselor. Bradley sat across from them, his arm bandaged as if he had just endured a brutal fight. He wore a mask of feigned innocence, ready to portray himself as the victim. "I'm very disappointed, Jamal," Principal Parker said, his voice low and accusatory. "I didn't think you were the troublemaker type, but what I've heard is something I cannot ignore." Jamal felt the heat of anger rise within him. He wanted to defend himself, to explain how he had been pushed to his limits, but he knew that anything he said could be twisted. Bradley wasted no time. "I was just walking by when Jamal attacked me. He ambushed us in the parking lot for no reason. I didn't even have a chance to defend myself," he claimed, his voice trembling with false emotion. Jamal clenched his fists, anger boiling inside him. He wanted to shout that it was Bradley who had provoked him, who had bullied him for years, but he remained silent, knowing that his words could easily be dismissed. Just as the tension in the room reached a breaking point, the door swung open. Sarah Dawson, a student known for her quiet demeanor, stepped inside. Jamal's heart raced as she stood tall, her gaze steady as she faced the principal. "I'm sorry for interrupting, but I need to say something," she stated firmly. The room fell silent, everyone's attention shifting to her. "I saw everything that happened in the parking lot last night," Sarah continued, looking directly at Bradley. It was Bradley and his friends who blocked Jamal's path. They provoked him and pushed him to his limit. Jamal was only defending himself. The shock in the room was palpable as Bradley's face turned pale. He opened his mouth to protest, but Sarah held her ground. "You can check the surveillance cameras. They will confirm what I'm saying." Principal Parker regarded Bradley with newfound scrutiny, the weight of Sarah's testimony shifting the dynamics in the room. Jamal felt a glimmer of hope as he watched Bradley's bravado crumble. The principal's expression softened slightly as he turned to Jamal. "You can go," he said, and Jamal's heart soared with relief. Stepping out of the office, Jamal felt an overwhelming mix of emotions: happiness, confusion, and gratitude. He had been exonerated, but more importantly, he no longer felt alone. For the first time, he sensed that he had allies, that his struggle had sparked something in others. As he walked through the school, the air felt lighter. The oppressive atmosphere that had once surrounded him began to dissipate. Students who had once ignored him now offered nods of acknowledgement, their eyes reflecting a newfound respect. Jamal's heart swelled with pride. He had not only stood up for himself, but had begun to inspire others to do the same. In the days that followed, Jamal noticed a shift among the students at Westwood High. Those who had once feared Bradley began to find their voices. They stood taller, no longer cowering in the shadows. Jamal realized that his victory had ignited a spark of courage in others, creating a ripple effect that was changing the school environment. One afternoon, as he was getting his books from his locker, Malik, a younger boy who had often been bullied, stood face to face with Ryan, one of Bradley's former lackeys. Jamal watched in awe as Malik held his ground, refusing to back down. Ryan glanced at him, uncertainty flickering in his eyes before he turned away. Jamal felt a surge of hope. Change was happening. Jamal had never imagined he would become a catalyst for such transformation. With each passing day, he understood that fighting back didn't always mean using fists. Sometimes it was about standing firm in one's truth and inspiring others to do the same. As he walked through the halls, he felt a sense of purpose, knowing that his actions had the power to inspire change, not just for himself, but for everyone who had ever felt powerless. As Jamal stepped into the dojo one late afternoon, the weight of the world seemed to lift off his shoulders. The familiar scent of wood and sweat greeted him, and he felt a sense of calm wash over him. The sunlight streamed through the windows, casting warm streaks across the training mats. It was here that he had found solace, purpose, and strength. Yet today, even this sanctuary felt tinged with a heaviness that he couldn't shake. Master Kobayashi was in the center of the dojo, wrapping a roll of hand tape with meticulous care. When he noticed Jamal's presence, he paused, his wise eyes assessing the young man before him. "Is something wrong?" he asked, his voice calm and inviting. Jamal took a deep breath, unsure of how to articulate the whirlwind of emotions swirling inside him. "I did it, Sensei," Jamal said quietly, his voice lacking the pride he expected to feel. "I stood up to Bradley. I fought back." Master Kobayashi looked at him thoughtfully, not immediately responding. After a moment, he placed the roll of tape aside and gestured for Jamal to sit. He felt a sense of pride swell within him, knowing that his actions had sparked a change, a ripple effect that encouraged others to embrace their own strength. One day, as he was gathering his things from his locker, he saw Malik standing up to a group of older boys who had once bullied him. Jamal watched as Malik held his ground, his confidence shining through. The boys hesitated, exchanging glances before walking away, and Jamal couldn't help but smile. This was what he had fought for, not just his own freedom, but the freedom of others who had felt powerless. Jamal had never sought to become a symbol of strength. He simply wanted to be left in peace. Yet, as the days turned into weeks, he realized that sometimes standing up for oneself could create waves of change that extended far beyond personal victories. He had inspired others to take control of their narratives, to reclaim their power, and to recognize their worth. As he left the dojo one night, Jamal stood outside, taking a moment to breathe in the cool evening air. The stars twinkled above, each one a reminder of the journey he had undertaken. He thought about the challenges that lay ahead, the battles he would still face, and the importance of continuing to fight, not just for himself, but for those who needed support. With a renewed sense of purpose, Jamal clasped his hands together in front of his chest, honoring the strength he had found within. "Father, I've learned to fight, not with my fists, but with my heart," he whispered softly into the night. He didn't expect an answer, but in the stillness of the air, he felt as though his father was listening. Jamal understood that the real strength didn't come from defeating others. It came from controlling oneself, facing fears head on, and inspiring those around him. He had not only stood up for himself, but had also ignited a flame of courage in others, proving that change was possible. And as he walked away from the dojo that night, he knew he would never return to the boy he once was. He was ready to embrace the future, whatever it might hold.